Hey D&D fam, I'm Quick.
And I'm Lee, and you're listening to
Divas and Ducats. So what is a diva? I think divas get a bad rep, but to me, diva is all about the attitude.
As for ducats, it's your finances, your assets, Skrilla, guap, your coin. We're talking all things with the potential to affect your pockets.
And while we're attorneys by trade, we are divas by choice. Divas and Ducats is for edutainment purposes.
Y'all, we are not Series 511 or 703 professionals. This does not create a financial advisor or attorney-client relationship. The views expressed here are solely our opinions and the opinions of our guests.
It's just our opinions, y'all. Okay, divas, let's talk ducats.
Hey D&D fam, welcome back. We are excited to have you all here. If you're watching, make sure you click this bell below so you are abreast of when we have new episodes.
Yes, abreast.
I have to let them know sometimes. I know words. You know what? Also, divasandducats.com, where you can sign up and get our newsletter and be aware of when we have new episodes as well. What is on our docket today?
So today, in honor of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we have a special guest on that is going to tell us about her story and how she came out and conquered it and blew up, really, just, took it and made her own power out of it, right? So we're just going to be honoring Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Okay. All right. So we are going to get into that. But first, just to let you know, this episode is sponsored by Hunter's Affordable Bail Bonding. They are here in all 100 counties of North Carolina. No bail is too big or too small. So if you know somebody, I know, holidays coming up, people might get in trouble, get a little too much juice in their systems. Just keep them on hand if something goes down and they need to get out.
Right.
Their number is 704-377-3733. And their website is www.bailbondcharlottenc.com. And so we will have that information in the show notes. So you could just have it if you ever need it for future reference.
And what areas do they service?
They service all of North Carolina. Okay. So wherever you are, Charlotte,
Fayetteville,
the mountains.
A lot of y'all at Fayetteville might need one.
Well,
Durham. Right, Durham. Here we go. Yeah. All right, so let's get into this. Yes. This healing after domestic violence. We are so happy and honored to have on Dr. A. Riggsbee. Say hey to the people.
Hello, everyone.
Yes, so tell us a little bit about yourself, just who you are outside of DV and HAD.
Okay. I am Dr. Angelia Riggsbee, affectionately known as Dr. A. Angela to my friends and family. I am a 33-year survivor of domestic violence. I am a mother, a grandmother, an advocate, a domestic violence expert, a friend, a line sister.
Yes.
And I don't know what else to tell you.
Tell us about your daughter, because I know you're proud.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. I have two daughters. I'm very proud of both of them.
Yes.
My youngest daughter is here in Charlotte with me, and she has just completed her CNA licensure. Okay. And she's going to be headed back to school to get her nursing degree.
Yes.
My oldest daughter has just been sworn in last Friday. She is a legal eagle, North Carolina Central University Law School
Eagle
grad. She was the managing editor and head of the Law Review.
Okay.
She was the SBA president. She is a mother, a wife, a minister, youth pastor, and now she is an attorney, a licensed attorney at Ellison Winters law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina.
So very proud of her, shouting her out, Legal Eagle.
Legal
Congratulations.
Eagle, yes.
We love our Black female attorneys on this podcast.
She has two aunties now.
Right?
Yep.
There are not many.
Yep.
There are definitely not many. So let's get into this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your story. So you were in a domestic violence relationship or marriage.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the marriage, like just even going into the marriage? Because we've often talked about like red flags.
Yes.
Did you see any going into the marriage, or just how that started, the happy times?
I did, and actually, there was an incident of abuse prior to me getting married, and that was a huge red flag. And what had happened is, I was about 20 years old dating this young man. Very nice young man, very well known in the community. His parents were well known. His dad was a pastor, a minister, well known in Durham. And we started to date, and everything was great. We were out one Saturday at his cousin's house, and we were just hanging out, having a good time. And then all of a sudden, his mood just switched, just like that. So he ordered me into the bathroom, and we went into the bathroom. And as we were in the bathroom, we were talking, and then all of a sudden, bam, he slapped me. And when he slapped me, my face hit the mirror, because the bathroom was really, really tiny. It was an older house. So when he slapped me, my face hit the mirror, and the mirror cracked. Luckily, my face didn't get cut, and I'm standing there stunned, like, what just happened?
Right.
Because I grew up in a home where my parents have been together since middle school.
Okay.
I never witnessed domestic violence in my home. So, and I'm a big daddy's girl. So the
Me
first
too.
thing I thought about was, okay, I need to get
Call
home
my
to my
daddy.
dad.
What?
Somebody take me to my car. Let me get home to my daddy. And that's what I did. I got a ride to his cousin, and all of them came out. They were like, what happened? And you could clearly see his handprint on my face. And I was like, he just slapped me. I'm ready to go. Everybody's trying to calm me down and talk to him. And he's like, I'm so sorry. By this time, I didn't want to hear nothing. I'm ready to go home. So I went and got my car, and I went home. Never said anything to my parents, because at that point, I'm like, okay, I've never had this happen to me before. I'm done.
Yeah.
So a couple of days go by, and I'm getting the phone calls, the crying, the tears, the roses at work, and the flowers. And I'm so sorry. I have been drinking. It'll never happen again. Of course, that's called the honeymoon phase. So, and as women, when we're in a relationship and when we love hard. So
and we are taught to forgive.
and we are, and we have a tendency to look for the betterment in people. So I did. I was like, okay, well, he kept, he at that point, he had his own place and whatnot. So he gave me a key. And so this was back in the days, we didn't have cell phones and all of that stuff. So if you dating somebody, they give you a key to their spot.
You can pop up.
You not just pop up. You get a key. I got a key, a drawer, and I could answer the telephone.
Right.
So I'm thinking,
ain't nothing going on. We good.
No, we good.
Yeah.
So we continued to date, and after a while, he asked me to marry him, and there had been no more abuse or anything like that.
How long was that after the first?
I would say probably about 6 months.
Okay.
So we went on dating for quite a while, and no incidents or anything. So he asked me to marry him. We got married. And not long after the marriage, the abuse started again. And it was one of those things where, a push, a shove, the talking to me any kind of way. And not long after we got married, I would say within maybe 4 months after the marriage, I found out I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. So I found out I was pregnant.
So the abuse had been happening before you found out you got pregnant.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, before I got pregnant with her, it was an incident that I ended up in the hospital. And what happened was I had went to my family reunion and went and hung out with my cousins and everything. And again, like I said, we didn't have cell phones and stuff back then. So when you left for the day. We didn't communicate until you got back. So I was gone all day, and when I came back, I actually had my cousin and her baby with me. So when I pulled up, we lived in a townhouse. So when I pulled up, he was there with some of his friends, and the door was open. And so he came to the door, and he slings the storm door open, and he's ordering me in the house. And I'm like, I'm thinking something is wrong in the house. I'm like, okay. So I asked one of his friends if they could help.
Were married at this time?
We were married,
okay.
yeah. So I asked one of his friends to help my cousin get out of the car. He got her out of the car. So we went upstairs. He ordered me upstairs, went upstairs to our bedroom, and he slammed the door behind us. And he pushed me in a corner. And it was a corner like, like over there. So he pushed me in the corner. I'm like, what in the world? And he starts bamming my head in the wall, and he's fussing and arguing and all in my face. I'm like, whoa, what is going on? What is happening? And at that time, he worked third shift at night, and we were living in some newly built townhomes. And I was, there at night by myself. So I was keeping this knife by the bed. And it was one of those older, back in those days, they had those never need sharpening knives where it would go in the big wood chunk, and every time you pulled it out, it sharpened it.
Yeah.
So I had that knife beside the bed, but I was keeping it there for protection because people had started breaking into the empty units beside us, stealing out the out of the appliances, right? So I was in that corner, and I looked down and I saw the knife. So I reached down and I got the knife, and I pulled it, and I was like, listen, just back up. Let me get out of this corner. You got me hemmed up in this corner. Back up. Let me get out of this corner. And I wasn't going to hurt him. So when I pulled the knife, he walked towards me. And when he walked towards me, I pulled back because I didn't want to hurt him. And when I pulled back, the end of the knife hit the wall and slid up my hand. And when it slid up my hand, this hand right here, it cut these 3 fingers and almost severed them off to the point that, they cut them and blood just started gushing everywhere. My hand was almost severed. I screamed. Everybody from downstairs came running upstairs. By the time they got up there, blood was just gushing everywhere. Somebody went and got a towel and wrapped my hand up, and I'm telling them, call 911, call 911. So they called 911 and they got me to Duke. And when I got to Duke, they looked at my hand, and he was sitting there in the ambulance telling me, don't tell them what happened. Don't tell them what happened. So when we get to Duke Medical Center, the doctors came in and they asked me what happened to your hand because we're going to have to do emergency surgery. And he looked at me, and he's standing over in the corner, and he's mouthing, don't say nothing. Don't you open your mouth. Don't say a word. So I'm scared, and I'm like, I told him I cut my hand washing dishes. They looked at my hand and they said, okay. So they walked out. After a while, another set came in. Everybody that came in asked me the same question. How did you cut your hand? They knew I didn't cut my hand washing dishes.
Right.
So they scheduled me. They had to schedule me for emergency surgery to keep me from losing my hand, losing my fingers. So I was in surgery for about 18 hours. Came out, and I had to go through
Like physical therapy.
I had to go through physical therapy. I had to learn how to dress myself again. I had to learn how to wipe myself. I had to learn how to tie my shoe again because I had no function of this hand. And they told me that I may never be able to have full function of this hand again. And to this day, at one point, they thought I might not be able to use my fingers, but I did. But I still don't have full function of this hand. And that was before I got pregnant. So at this point, and having to go through all of that and still lying to my family, because when my family got to the hospital, they were asking what happened. And my dad told me later on, he said, they don't believe that you cut your hand washing dishes. And they told me that. What happened? So I said, I'll talk to you later. And I told him I have to talk to him another time because he was always right there. Now, back then, during these times, domestic violence was not something that was talked about.
No.
Yeah.
It was always said that what happens in your house stays in your house. You don't tell. And at that point, I was really fearful because he was very intimidating. So I didn't tell my dad until later on. But later on, and months later, I got pregnant with my daughter, and the abuse stopped. So
you were 21 at this time?
I was about 21, 22. So at this point, I went on through my pregnancy, and I was about 7 months pregnant. And he came home one day. He was really upset about something. I had cooked dinner, and he was pissed off, and he took the food and threw it somewhere. And I was like, okay, I'm getting ready. I don't have time for this. By this, I'm big and pregnant. And the next thing I know, he takes me by my throat and by my neck, and he throws me up against the door, and he jacks me up by my neck. And I'm up against this door, off my feet, pregnant. And I can feel the air leaving my body. And all I could think about before I passed out was grabbing my stomach. And I grabbed my stomach, and all I remember saying was, Jesus, Jesus. And I remember grabbing my stomach, and I ended up on the floor because when I came to, he was nowhere to be found. He was gone. And I was still sitting there, holding my stomach. So I ended up, the next day going to make sure my baby was okay and everything. So by this time, I'm like, this is getting to be too much. This is getting to be too much. And I do not want to raise my child in an environment like that.
Right.
So after I had my daughter, the abuse went on for a while. And I remember one day he came home. My breaking point was he came home one day and he slapped me so hard that he knocked me down. And when I fell right beside my baby's carrier. She was sitting in her little car seat carrier. And I fell right beside her and I looked over at her face and she began to cry. And I was like, this is it. I can't do this anymore. So when he left, I called my family, my dad and them. I called my dad and my dad came and got me and I left. So you're probably thinking that that's where the abuse stopped.
Well, I was going to say, did you leave?
That's not where it ended.
Okay.
That's not where it ended. I did leave. I did not go back. I ended up getting my own. I stayed with my parents for a while.
Was this the first time your daddy verbally knew that you were?
No, because I had actually went to my dad not long after the knife incident, and I shared with him what happened, and I told him what had been going on. And I do remember distinctly one night. I told him what happened, and I went home to my parents because we had an argument and he had hit me, and I went home to my parents, told my dad what happened, and I remember my dad going to the back and coming back, and he said, "I'm gonna follow you home. When we get to your house, you go in the house and you stay in there. I need to have some conversation with him." And so it was that night that my dad had a conversation with him, but he made sure he saw his firearm and let him know, if you put your hands on my daughter again, it's going to be some problems. And so it was not long after that, a period of time after that, that he hit me that last time. And I was like, you know what? I got to go. Yeah. And so I left. I went home and I stayed with my family for a while, my mom and dad. And I eventually got my own place. So everybody thinks when I share, because I do a lot of public speaking, and people probably thinking right then at that point, oh, so, that's where the abuse ended. That's where it stopped. That's not where it stopped. It actually got more intense because I was living my life. We were co-parenting. He was living his life. I was living mine. I was in Durham in front of the Chicken Hut on Fayetteville Street. I was down there in front of the Chicken Hut talking to a gentleman. I had pulled over talking to this guy that I know, just having some conversation. And my daughter was in the back seat of my car. And I had pulled over and I was talking to this guy. And
how old is she at this time?
She was probably about 5 months, 5 or 6 months. Okay. So as I'm talking to him, I see his car pass me and it goes up the street. And I'm watching. His car goes up the street and turns around, comes back. I said, oh God, here we go. So when he came back, he pulled a little bit further down, and he asked me to motion for me to come in his car. I went over there. So by this time, I've gotten my self-esteem back. I'm feeling good about myself. I'm like, I'm not in fear anymore. So I'm like, I'm good. So I went to the car and I'm talking. I'm like, what is it? And he starts asking me all kind of questions. What are you talking to him for? What are you doing down here? And I'm like, listen, you are doing you. I'm doing me. We're not together. You do you. I don't bother you. Don't bother me. Let's just leave it alone. So when I turned and walked away from him, and when I walked away from his car, I heard the engine rear up. And he hit the gas. And as I was walking away from his car, he hit the gas. He hit me. He mauled me down in the middle of the street. I hit the hood of the car. I hit the hood. I bounced on the windshield, and I bounced off the car, and I ended up on the pavement. And as I laid there, I'm hearing people scream all around me. Oh my God, he just ran her over. And I could hear them somebody called 911. And all I could think going in and out of consciousness was get my baby out of my car. So the ambulance came and they took me to Durham Regional. And I told them they got my baby out of the car. They got me to Durham Regional. They called my parents. My parents got there. And as I was in the back of the emergency, in the back room, they were telling my mom and my father, they were telling my mom and dad, she may be paralyzed from the neck down because I had no feeling. And they said, we think she's bleeding internally, so we got to do some tests. And so they did some tests. They did a test the first time and brought me back out. And I'm laying there on the stretcher, and my mom, and the stretcher at the head was cutting me in the back of my head. So I was trying to move, and my mom was like, "No, you need to lay still because if you move the wrong way, you may never walk again." And I still had no feeling. So as I was laying there, I prayed and I asked God. I said, God, if you allow me to live, if you allow me to be able to take care of my child, I promise I'll serve you for the rest of my life. And I'll be an advocate and a voice for women and children of domestic violence. So they took me back in and did more tests, and the doctors said that the bleeding that they saw had dried. They were out. We don't know what's going on. She's a miracle because the bleeding that we saw has stopped. So they kept me there, and over the next 48 hours, I began to get the feeling back in my legs and in my arms and everything. And so I ended up leaving the hospital about 2 days later, and I was able to walk and have full function. And so it was at that point I said, you know what? This has happened to me for a reason, and God, I'm going to keep my promise to you. And I have ever since then. So I've been an advocate and a voice ever since then.
Was that the last instance of domestic violence between y'all? Like, did he go to jail for that? Or?
That was the last instance of domestic violence from us. He did not go to jail. And the reason why he did not go to jail, because again, this was 30-something years ago. The laws were not like they are now. Domestic violence was not talked about. It was not in the courts like it is now.
There was no DV court.
There was no DV court. And so what they charged him with was assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to inflict serious bodily injury. And my attorney asked me, they did arrest him. He did get arrested. He got arrested, but he bonded out like within a day or so. And my attorney asked me when we went to court, he said, do you want him to have jail? Do you want him to serve jail time? At that time, I was 21, 22 years old. I was working a job. I was barely making $12,000 a year. He was making almost double what I was making because he was making good money. We had this new baby. I had an apartment. I need him to go to work. I need him to go to work because I need him to pay child support so he can help take care of his child. He's not going to do me any good in jail during prison time. So he ended up, his attorneys, we ended up having to, sue him, do a plea deal, and we ended up getting, personal injury because of my injuries and whatnot. So,
wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So in that, because I know you were saying like you were able to go to your father, and he came, because I know a lot of times they, like you said, especially back then, people are like, keep it in the house, right? And they unfortunately they often tell wives like, what happens between you and your husband is y'all's business, right? Don't bring that to our house. That's not our business. And and sometimes even friends now, fathers will say like, if you're in this moment, if you're not going to leave them, then don't talk to me about it, right? Like, so you become siloed and you become silenced almost. But it seemed like at least your father did believe you, and then go. But I know in that instance when you cut your hand, your cousin was there. Did she ever say anything, or
she didn't know exactly how it happened? She didn't know
just
exactly how it happened. She just knew that they just knew they heard me scream and all of that, but she didn't tell my family what happened because the next day she went on to church for some kind of, I think one of his friends or whatever that night ended up taking her back to our family down in the country or whatever, and she went on to church because I think she was thinking he was going to call my family. Who goes through something like that and ends up at the hospital with those kind of injuries and does not call the person's parents to let them know they're in the hospital? I had to call my family. I called my mom and dad after I had surgery, had been in intensive care, came out of intensive care and was in the recovery room. And I'm like, is my parents here? And they're like, no. And I'm like, can somebody call my parents and please let them know that I'm here? Because they didn't even know where I was. So when my dad got up there, he visibly, when he saw I mean, all this hand was bandaged up, and they told him she almost lost her hand, the whole nine. He was visible. I mean, he was upset, but until he could talk to me and find out exactly what happened, he didn't know what to do. And every time I tried to talk to my dad, he was right there. He was right. He made sure he was right there. So I had to wait till I got to a point where it was just me and my dad, or I, tell him, look, I need you, come get me. I need to talk to you or whatever. And it was after I was able to talk to him by myself.
So like afterwards, because a lot of times you'll see victims try to leave, and there's that's when they say it's the most dangerous.
Yes.
And so with your situation, did you have to get a restraining order from there? I don't even know if that was you were talking about the times. What was like your safeguard? I guess once
we had. I think we did do some kind of something. Back then, they didn't have the 50 Bs. They didn't have but we did some. I think we had some kind of restraining order where he couldn't come within a certain feet of me. And when we worked it out so that when he wanted to get his child, because we were co-parenting or whatever, we didn't. I had full custody, but he still had visitation. So we worked it out so that when he wanted to get her, he had to meet me at my parents' house. He wasn't to come to my apartment or anything like that. He was to meet me at my parents' house, and somebody was always there. And even if I was there, my mom or my dad or somebody was there. So and he never tried anything. So when when he came around them, it was like he put on this different face. So that's why when I was going through the abuse, it was so difficult for people to kind of understand or believe, because they were like, what? His dad is a preacher, his mom, she's so sweet. And then when he comes around, he's so this and he's so that and da-da-da-da-da. So, when people put on that front and they're around your people, it's like, oh, okay. They don't see that dark side. And it took me having to have a long conversation one day. I'll never forget it. I was at my parents' house, and I was in the backyard with my dad, because this is where we had some of our best conversations. He was working on the car or whatever, and I was back there, us daddy's good, we back there talking and whatnot. So I was having a conversation with him, and I began to share with him everything that I had been going through. And I'll never forget it, because after I continued to share everything with him, my father literally broke down and cried. And in front of me, he was like, I had no idea you were going through this. And I didn't, it was a guilt thing too, because, you have this wedding and stuff, and then, you haven't been married that long. And the next thing you know, you got family members saying, oh Lord, you ain't been married that long, and you gonna sit up here and, you gonna break up and da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, and then even with certain friends, church friends, I, was Christian, been Christian for a long time, but I went to one of my Christian sisters and was sharing with her what I was going through. And she had the audacity to tell me, well, God doesn't want you to leave your husband. You need to stay and work it out. And after a while, I listened to that one or twice. I'm like, listen, let me tell you something. The God that I know and the God that I serve said that I am beautifully and wonderfully made in his image. It's not his desire for me to stay here and continue to get my behind whooped either. If you choose to stay in situations like that, that's on you, but that's not what I'm going to do. So needless to say, our friendship kind of ended, but I had to do what was best for me and what I knew was best for me and my daughter.
Right. And with co-parenting, because she wasn't even one then. Were there any issues from there, or even like with him putting his hands on her?
Did you have any fear of that? That's what was my question.
Nope. Because he loved her so much. He always.
He made that.
Yeah, he made that, and she was always his baby girl. So from the moment that she was born, he loved his daughter. I never really feared that, because I think after everything transpired and I had gotten to a point that, okay, the abuse, I was out on my own, and after he ran me over with the car and all of that, I had gotten to a point that my family rallied around me. So he knew, if you try something stupid, then that might end your life. So
I think it's because I know, as you being an advocate, you can probably see the complete opposite of what you had with the family support, right? You grew up in that kind of home, same as me, grew up in a home parents are still married,
Yep.
didn't grow up in seeing domestic violence, they're still in a loving home. But you do see that, so you were able to go back into that kind of environment, right?
Right.
And that, I think, was probably a huge catalyst in you being able to move on and being able
Yes.
to start healing. But a lot of people, I'm sure that you've seen, don't have that.
That's
Like, they
right.
don't
That's
have
true.
that support.
That's
They
true.
have more of the friends that's saying
Yeah.
you should stay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Or the friends is telling them just out of the pocket, just leave. And you can't
Yeah.
tell a victim of domestic violence to just leave. It is a process.
Mhm.
There are things that need to be put in place because you never know. And it's always that's when things get more vital
Right.
and violent. And they're more prevalent for death when they leave
Mhm.
because that abuser has now lost that power and
Mhm.
control.
Mhm.
Domestic
become
violence
erratic.
is all
Yeah.
about power and control. So when that person leaves,
Mhm.
they flip because they're
Mhm.
like, what is it that I need to do
Mhm.
to get this power and control
Mhm.
over this person back?
Yeah.
So that's a thing. And, I have seen women and I have counseled with women and talked to women. And my thing is, people ask me all the time, doesn't it get tiring because you see them, they come, they get some assistance, they get help, and then they go back.
Mhm.
And I tell people it does, and it's emotionally draining,
Mhm.
but that's what God has called me to do because I have to wait on them. I can't when someone has had that power and control taken away from them, you give them that power and control back to make the decisions that they need to make for their own lives.
Yeah.
So I never tell them, I'm like, I'm here for you whenever you want to do whatever it is you want to do.
Mhm.
You let me know, and I'm going to move how you move.
Yeah.
We're going to take certain steps. We're going to do what we need to do, and we're going to move a certain way. But I am not going to force you. I'm not going to tell you. You tell me, and I'm going to rock with you the whole way. So.
And when you said like certain things need to be in place to leave, like
Mhm.
what are some of those things that need to
Safety planning, especially if there's children involved. Several years ago when I was back in Durham, I helped a young lady. She had 5 children. She was her husband was in the military. She was in Georgia, and she was being abused, and she had the kids, and she was totally under his thumb because she had no education, no job, no none of that. And he was abusing her, and he was threatening the kids, not mistreating the kids. So when she had left and went to her family, some of her family in Alabama, she called me and she was like, I'm ready to go. I'm tired. So there were certain things that I had to do to put in place. I'm like, okay, I'm going to send you a package. And I had things like sending her a cell phone, a cell phone, sending her some money, and a map. Okay, do you know how to drive? Can you drive from here to here? Okay, I need you to leave, and when you get this package, when you're ready to go, you need to leave and get from here to here. Get to this hotel. I need you to call me. You got money on a card to do this, and this. When you get there, let me know. I'm gonna head from here. I ended up leaving Durham and going because she couldn't really drive in Atlanta. Because she just was so used to being, small little, So she drove from her parents. She drove from her family's house. She drove from Alabama. She drove to a certain spot in Atlanta and said, I can't drive in this traffic. I'm scared. And so I got her to a certain spot. She was at a hotel, got the kids something to eat. He didn't know where she was. She had left the old cell phone behind. So he couldn't track her. So I ended up having to drive from Durham to where she was in Atlanta. Go to where she was. I had to get rent a hitch, put it on my truck, on my SUV, hitch up her car, pull her car back, and put her and her 5 kids in my vehicle and bring them back to Durham with me. And they stayed in my home until I could help her get herself situated with an apartment, a job, get the kids get their records. And so when I say that things that have to be put in place, like if you got children, you get their school records. You have to, so that you can get them in school, birth certificates, social security cards, all those kind of important bank cards, if they have bank information, all of these important information and documents that they'll need when they get ready to leave so that they can reestablish themselves somewhere else.
And a lot of times I know, well, we've seen in Lifetime movies, but like you saying she had 5 kids, I know a lot of times the um abuser may use the kids
Oh,
right as
absolutely.
leverage for so I'm just thinking like even if she hadn't had that safety plan and he knew he could have went and pulled them kids out of school, she wasn't gonna leave without the kids,
Right. Absolutely.
So like have you seen, I don't know, maybe potential kidnapping charges in those kind of situations? And
Well, we actually, even with him, I mean, when I tell you he was in the military and I had to go head to head with the military, I had to go head to head with the military because, of course, they're going to try to protect their own until you bring them information. And when I started, we shared the information. This is what he's doing because he was a sergeant. So, he was getting the BAH allotment for her and all of the kids. He was getting all the money. He was controlling all of the money. So once I started sharing all of this information with Jag and everything, she started getting the money that she was entitled to. And we were going to court in Durham for her to get, because she had gotten, first thing we had to do was get a 50B to get the restraining order so she could have temporary custody of the kids. Well, when they did that and they served him, he came to Durham and he had to come to Durham to court. Of course, he's going to come up here in all his little military uniform and everything so that he can have, the prejudice of the court and this, that, and the other. And yeah, he tried to, he had the children brainwashed because, she would let them after a while call him just to check in or whatever, because he was like, you're trying to keep my kids away from me. Yeah. So, it was a mess because the daughter was such a daddy's girl. She was calling him, sneaking and calling him, telling him things, and he ended up finding out where they lived. We had gotten her set up in a 4-bedroom apartment, furnished it with different resources in Durham. She had a good job that she would have never had because she had the lack of education, but she had a good job, had the kids in school. They were doing great. Everything was going good until he found out where the kids were going to school. Those kind of things started happening. He was trying to use that. And then next thing you know, he had her car repossessed because the car was in his name. So when they start taking things away from them, such as the fight that affects their finances. So he took her car. He had her car repossessed. He called and told him where the car was. She went out there one morning to get ready to go to work. The car is gone. She can't get to work. So now she can't get to work. So somebody that we knew let her use their car. So she had transportation. Next thing you know was a situation with the school. He pops up here from out of Georgia and he goes up to the school, and it got to be a lot. And so the next thing I know, she was good. Everything was okay. But these small things and these small little things were breaking her down. Next thing I know, I went to her house one night to check on her and the kids, as I always did, just check on them and make sure they were good. Left her house about 6:30 to checking on them or whatever the next day. Went to work because we worked at the same place. I worked at the transportation, Durham Area Transit, and she drove one of the minivans over there. I get to work the next day, and I just happened to walk over to talk to one of my coworkers over there, and I said something about, I didn't see her car out front. They were like, she doesn't work anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? She doesn't. What are you talking about? They said, oh, she came and got her check this morning and said that she was leaving. What? What was she driving? A U-Haul. Now, this is the same person that couldn't drive in Atlanta, and I had to hitch her vehicle up to my vehicle, but she had gotten there early enough to get her check, go to the bank, cash her check, go run a U-Haul, packed up everything that was in the apartment. So they started packing the night right after I did my little check-in on them. Went to the apartment empty. She done packed up everything, put it in the U-Haul, put them 5 kids in that U-Haul, and back to Georgia she went. Well, she went back to Alabama to her family. And he ended up coming there because he was from Alabama as well. He ended up coming there, getting the kids. So he took the kids. So kind of like a kidnapping, but it really wasn't, because by this time, you're not protected. You don't have that temporary restraining order in effect, and it's not in effect there. You don't have that temporary custody order that you had in Durham, in Alabama. He came up there, he took the kids, took them back to Georgia, and she never got them back. Never got them back. So yes, I have seen those cases. She never got those kids back. They stayed with him. He took her. He ended up taking her to court in Georgia, getting a divorce. Had her arrested. Because they had gotten into an argument and she did something to his car. He had her arrested. She was down there in jail. It was a mess, but she never got her kids back. Yeah. And he ended up trying to get child support from her. He's in the military.
But all these
as a sergeant, mind you.
As a sergeant. But what he did too also is there was some clause that whatever he did, that there was some clause because they had been married for so many years. She was entitled to his retirement when he retired. He waited it out and he did something to the fact that when he divorced her and when he retired, she got none of his pension. So.
And so was the help that you provide, is it done under your organization? You developed an organization?
Yes, Healing After Domestic Violence. HAD is the acronym. So everything that I do pertaining to domestic violence, assisting women and children and men, because we do have men that are victims of domestic violence as well. We do not discriminate. Everything that I do is under the umbrella of HAD. We offer counseling, court advocacy when we've gone to court, any kind of resources that they need if we don't have them, which a lot of them times we don't have it on hand. I have a network of resources that I pull together. If they need things like resume writing, I'm a former instructor, college instructor, so I help them with resume writings. Budgeting. I used to teach in the prison, and I have a curriculum that's called Money Smart, and it's like a 10 modular that takes you all through how to manage money, how to budget, how to look at your credit scores and things like that. So I kind of help them, teach them how to get that, because a lot of these women are solely dependent upon the man, and they don't have access to that. That's part of the control. So teach them anything that they need. There's dangerous situations where I've actually gotten up, put my sweats on, load my gun up, and leave up out of the house because I'm leaving out, going to help someone get out of the situation and escape out of that situation. So as I've gotten older and become a grandma, I don't try not to do that as much. But there has been times where I've had to do that, and there's been some volatile situations where I've been shot at. So yeah.
And so what are, signs to look for? And also, I know it's a fictional show, but the part where you were saying it's a process is so important to remember because, okay, you may not watch like P-Valley, but
I watch P-Valley.
Okay. So the situation with Mississippi. Are you caught up?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, of course, everybody is so upset about that whole, how that turned out.
Yeah.
And so, but of course, at least the first season, everybody's like, why don't she just leave? Like, she makes the money, like this man. And to your point, like, even, again, fictional, even though she's making the money, it's a process. It's such a mental thing, right?
It's a mental thing. It is. And she loved him. You have children. You have small children with this person. You love this person. And again, as women, we love hard and we want to see a change. We want to believe the best because I love P-Valley. Jay Nichols, he went to Central. That's our guy. You don't watch it. Okay.
She has issues with black cinema. We got to get her caught up.
Okay, you're going to get you caught up because that's your, he went to Central.
I watched it just for him. And the other girl's a Delta. So.
Is she?
The one that, she's the main character.
Mercedes?
Mercedes a Delta? Okay. Oh. All right, girl. But, so when the part came where Diamond was getting ready to take him out and shoot him, or getting ready to, when he was beating him up, and she pulled the gun
on Diamond,
and she pulled the gun on Diamond. I think when the season came back on, when she talked to Diamond, she was like, all I could think about is if you had killed him, where would you be and how would things be right now? You know what I'm saying? So a lot of it's a mental thing. It's an emotional tie. It's a mental thing. But I was quite upset when I saw, and I felt like it was going to happen because she was getting ready to go. Everything was in place. But when she went to her mom's house, went to her stepmama's house and said that he had already came and got the kids, that happens. Things like that happen. And she knew. But that's as soon as she said he came and got the kids, she knew then that her plan to escape that situation was ruined because she had her stuff together. She had the money, she had the paperwork, she had the car, she had everything. She was ready to go. But yeah, that happens. That's very realistic. Very realistic.
So what are some, like you say, I mean, your wasn't even really a sign it was actual incident of domestic violence in your case before you got married. But what are some signs that a person can look for, you know, if they're in a relationship and maybe it doesn't go to that level of, you know, getting smacked into a mirror, but, you know, like you said, there was a sudden mood change and it was very
controlling behavior, wanting to know where you are, who you with, where you going, trying to tell you where you can and cannot go. These young people these days, I love our young people, but they need to be educated. And that's why I do a lot of talking and a lot of speaking to young people in high school, because all of this wanting to be on each other's social media, passwords, got to have passwords. They got to know who you with, where you going, what you doing, all of that, telling them what they can and cannot wear, just downing them, making them feel like if nobody's going to want them but that person. It's a, you know, the apps that they put on, you know, some people have put apps on people's phones so that they can track them to know where they're going. Right. So if you call
my mom does that. So I need to talk to my mom about it.
What?
Okay, that's different. Your mom.
Go ahead. Segue. Continue.
So if they want to know where you are and what you're doing and who you with, and
we've been talking 2 weeks.
Yeah, and all of those kind of things. So the controlling, any type, you know, controlling behavior, something that when it doesn't feel right, and you get that, that's a little odd, you know. And I think a lot of times we need to teach our young ladies how you are to be treated, and when we show them, this is how a man is supposed to treat you. This is what's healthy, and this is what's not. They can, tearing up your stuff, breaking your stuff, throwing your stuff. I've had young ladies that were getting ready to go to jail for domestic violence for taking their boyfriend's phone, going through his phone, and then taking not giving it back to him. That's you taking somebody's possession. That's you can't hold somebody's property like that, and then throwing it or tearing it up, destroying it. All those kinds of things.
Yeah. And especially, like, to your point, like the verbal. Yes. I think people ignore the verbal because it's not physical. You feel like, oh, they had a bad day. Like, to your point, like people talking to you any kind of way or like just blowing up, that kind of stuff. Like, that's not normal.
Yeah. My daughter, my oldest daughter, we had a situation when she was growing up. She was a teenager. And there was a little young guy that was liking her at school. She was in middle school. And she was popular. She was smart. She was a cheerleader, you know, well-rounded. Everybody loved her and so on. So I knew the principals and everything, but I knew them on a good term. And there was this little young guy that was liking her. And she told me about him. I was like, okay. She was like, but you know, she was young. So I'm very protective of my daughter. And so one day the little dude rode his bike to our house with a dozen of roses. And I'm like, I'm a grown woman. Ain't nobody came over here and brought me no dozen of roses. But he came with a dozen roses. He said he had mowed grass and he saved up his money. And he rode his bike. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like, who is this? And she's like, that's the little boy that likes me and da-da-da. I'm like, okay. So she and I have always had a very close relationship. So she would talk and tell me everything. So I was at the school one day and her principal called me to the side. No, I had been to the school and her principal saw me leave. She didn't catch me. She called me and she said, I just want to let you know that the little guy that is liking Chasley, he's not a good influence. He stays in trouble. He stays with his aunt. So that's kind of I don't know. I don't know if that's a good influence to be around her. And I'm like, oh, okay. But he had asked me if she could go with him to the fair. And I was like, well, I don't let her just go with anybody. So his aunt called me and was like, well, no, I'm going to take him. And, I promise I'll have, what time do you want her home? And I'll be there as a chaperone. So I'm like, okay, but I'm very protective of my daughter. So because the aunt asked and I knew some people that knew her, I let her go. Well, when she came home that evening, she was shaking. She was not herself. And when she got home, I was like, what's wrong? She said, he got in a fight at the fair. I was like, do what? She said, he got in a fight at the fair with somebody, with some guys. And when I tried to pull him back, they said, come on, let's calm down. He slung around and he pushed me. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. So I called this. I'm like, look, he does not need to come over here anymore. She told me he got in a fight. We don't do that. We don't do that. And at that time, my daughter was doing teen court. She's always wanted to be an attorney since a little girl. So she was doing teen court. And when I tell you that girl was fierce, even at that age, when she got her little assignment that this is who she was going to represent, she studied and she had her little stuff together. She in there getting her closing statements, all of that, had her little suit together. She was ready. So we went to teen court probably about a week later, and she had her stuff together. She's always been very, very confident. She was up there, she was doing her thing, and she was doing her statements, and she turned around and looked. And when she turned around and looked, he was sitting in the courtroom. And when I looked at her and she saw him, no, he was in the audience. No, he was in the audience. And when she turned around and saw him, her entire countenance changed. To the point that they had to take a recess, they take a break. I said, something is not right. So I called her and I went up to her, I said, what's wrong? She said, I told him not to come here, that I did not want to see him anymore. And so I looked back there. So me and a couple of my sheriff friends went back there and had a little conversation. I'm like, you need to go, you need to leave. She told you she didn't want you here. You need to leave. And we need to, I had to let him know, do not come around her again at school. Don't talk to her. Don't deal with her. Don't just leave her alone. And she's got a brother, one of my godsons, that he was at school and he's a boxer. He let him know, don't mess with my sister. Right. So, but it was those kind of things when I saw that and when I saw the change in her, that was a red flag. I'm like, no, we're not doing this. Yeah. And she had known enough from what I had talked to her about domestic violence to realize this is not healthy, this is not safe, this doesn't feel good, and I don't want any part of that.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of it, like you said, especially with younger people that may not recognize it, is a lot of how it doesn't make you feel, right? Sometimes you can interpret that as admiration. Yeah. And it's not necessarily so, but I also think some of the same things that you were saying sometimes might not necessarily be controlling, while they are red flags. Like, I don't necessarily believe that a person telling you, hey, your shorts may be a little too short. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, but someone who likes to wear short shorts, as a teen, you got the body for it or whatever. That's just the way I like to dress. It might not necessarily be controlling. They might just be like, look, you coming around my daddy, Right. Now, it's the way it is, but it's the context and how it is. Right. But just tell somebody, oh, you need to take that off. I don't like that. Right. You need to take that off. I don't want to see you in it. That's something different, but to just kind of be overbearing and to try to make and to force their feelings onto you. Right. That's a difference. And like you were also saying, like how they're saying it to you, right? The verbal, probably name calling with that. Yes. So, just definitely pay attention to how that what you're saying how it makes you feel, because like you said, her countenance changed, what I'm saying? Like, suddenly you might not feel as safe. You kind of feel leery, like don't write those things off. Right. God gives women intuition for a reason. He give it to us very early. Like, don't disregard it. Yeah, for sure. And I'm not saying that when you're in a relationship with someone, sharing with them where you're going or who you're with, that's a sign of them wanting to control you. That's not always the case, because we're in a time now, you need to let somebody know somewhere you're going. All of these
You know, it's a lot going on. So if I'm going somewhere, I'm letting my man know, listen, I'm going here.
Right.
I'm going to be over here. I'll text you when I'm leaving, and I'll let you know when I'm at home, just so he knows, so he's not worried.
Right.
And it's not like, well, you got to show me, you got to tell me that.
Right.
No, I want you to know where I am, because if you don't hear from me in a certain time, I'm going to need you to call and check on me.
Right.
And there's very much a difference between that and I've been tracking you. You went where you said you was going to be.
Or coming home after being at the family reunion and you just go upstairs.
Right.
I got a whole attitude versus, are you okay? You know, I try to call you.
Right.
So, it's definitely, you know, a lot of body language goes into the differences.
Right. And the intent behind it. You know, if the intent is, I love you, but I just want to make sure you're okay. Safe. It's a lot going on, and I just want to make sure you're safe. That's the difference. And I know who you with, where you going. I want to put my finger on you. That's a big difference. That's a big difference. Even to this day, you know, if I go somewhere, I'm gonna call. Even just leaving Charlotte to go from Charlotte to home to Durham. Before I leave, my man is gonna know where I'm at. And where I'm going, and my mom and dad, I'm on my way to Durham. I'm leaving now, and such and such. And they know if I'm not if I have to stop, and I try not to stop, I always make sure I got enough gas to get me there. Right. But if I have to stop, I try not to use the bathroom till I get there, because it's just so much. It's so much going on. But if I have to, then before I get out of my car and put my concealed weapon on my side, I'm gonna let my daddy know. Listen, I've stopped at such and such gas station. I'm getting ready to go in the restroom, and I'll let you know when I'm back in the car and when I'm headed back on 85, because I just want to let somebody know where I am and what's going on. So that's a difference.
So what would you tell someone, like if they're going through it now, or they're not quite there, they're thinking about it? What advice would you give somebody going through it?
The advice that I would give them is to search your heart. Look at what your situation is, and if you have children, how is it affecting the children? Because the things that we allow ourselves to stay into, there are so many children that are affected by the residual of domestic violence. And even if they're thinking about it, you know, if they want to talk to somebody, you know, I'm going to share my information. If they're thinking about it, then, you know, reach out. We can get together and talk about it. I'm not going to persuade a person either way, but I am going to be that listening, non-judgmental ear to say, okay, what is it? And again, put that onus and that power and control back in them. What do you want to do? What do you see yourself in 2 years? And in your current situation, the things that you want to see yourself doing, can you do it in that current situation? Are you safe? That's my first question when I talk to them. Are you safe? Are you and the children safe? Are you in a good space? Because if you're getting abused every day, or you just don't know when the next hit is going to come, how are you feeling about how you're living and what your situation is right now? And let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let me see what you want to do and how I can help you. And then when you're ready to make a move, we'll do that, and I'll walk with you through that process. But I have to put that back on them and say, I'm not going to make a decision for you. I'm here when you're ready. But you know when you're ready. You know, when you're going through it, you know when enough is enough. Now, I knew it was building up for me. You know, people say you shouldn't have married him because when he hit you, that's true. When my hand got cut, you should have left then. Okay, but I got a hand that's cut and I'm going through physical therapy and this, that, and I'm trying to get, my focus is I got to get me back right. I'm handicapped right now, so I got to get me back right. And then as soon as I was at a point where I was getting functional with that, I got pregnant. It was plain. I mean, it wasn't a mistake. So this is my blessing from God. Got pregnant, brought this beautiful baby into this world, and that was my true why. She was my true why. I knew what I wanted for myself, but I knew I wanted better for her. And so when she came into this world, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna take but so much. And then when he hit me that last time, and I landed right beside her and looked in her face as a newborn baby, 4 or 5 month old baby, 3 months. No, she was only 2 or 3 months. And I'm seeing her cry, and I'm like, this is it. I gotta go. I gotta go. So a person knows when enough is enough.
So give our Diva family your information for your organization and how they can reach out to you if they want resources, donations, and to volunteer.
We always are looking for funding because we are private. We looking for funding all the time. We're looking for volunteers because I need help. The website is www.healingafterdv.com. You can find all of my contact information there. The telephone number is 919-307-7613. Please feel free to reach out to me. I do public speaking, I do webinars, I do all of that. So please feel free to reach out and we will definitely get back with you and share anything that we can.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and definitely thank you for all the work that you have done and putting your life on the line to serve the purpose that you promised God you would do. It has been, I'm sure, a scary journey, but also a very rewarding journey when the things do go right. So, thank you for all the work that you do. And we will have her information in our show notes below.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you all. This is all we have for today. Like Quick said, we will have all this information and also some resources just in case there's someone that's going through and it's totally anonymous, but just make sure you have the things that you need to stay informed. Our website is www.divasandducats.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram under Divas and Ducats. And if you would like to email us questions, comments, shenanigans, concerns, divaadvice@gmail.com. All right, y'all. In the meantime, in between time,
have a great attitude.
All right, bye.
Bye.